Thank you. Yung deputy director title was fake. I was actually a research associate. We had to fake it so that in the third world studies was, would have a nicer staff. So, mayong udto sa inyong tanan. I'm sorry, I have to start with Visayan. Daghang salamat kayo nga mitambong mo diri. In a time which we all could have used for siesta instead of possibly grossing out. It's especially nice to see old friends. I've never seen Ed. Last time I saw Edru Abraham was in 1988 or 89. And then I think before that, in 86, we were all crying at EDSA when Bastard Marcos flew away. Eileen, Lenny. I have to apologize, however, for looking crappy with a raspy voice. When I left Usami City, I'm from Northern Mindanao. For here, it was raining there, and being located in a floodplain, the water of the nearby creek immediately rose and flooded our small house's entrance. When I landed here, I began to feel joint aches and muscle pains and developed a slight fever. I then realized that I was walking around in chinelas through the floods. And immediately, I thought that this may be symptoms of two of my favorite diseases. Leptospirosis, which you get when your skin, especially with an open wound, gets in contact with rat shireen. And that's or dengue, that's scourge of Asian cities born by the afternoon mosquito Aedes aegypti. And so I immediately Googled, so bad at this. I immediately Googled the symptoms for dengue, for both diseases, and they were this. So I will Google them. For dengue, it's high fever, possibly as high as 105 degrees Fahrenheit, pain behind the eyes and the joints, muscles and or bones, severe headache, rash for over most of the body, mild bleeding from the nose or gums, and bruising easily. And for leptospirosis, a high temperature fever, it is usually between 38 and 40 degrees centigrade, 104 Fahrenheit, chills, sudden headaches, nausea and vomiting, loss of appetite, although these symptoms in leptospirosis will not become full-blown 30 days, takes 30 days after the exposure. So far so good, but we shall see what happens on August 8th. Okay. So whatever happens, let me here first express my heartfelt gratitude to the UP Asian Center, its Dean, Dr. Ed Gonzalez, and the faculty, my counterpart, Dr. Ed Talim, for giving me this fellowship and a chance to return to the old alma mater, which I left in 1988. That's how old I am. After working here in UP for 10 years as a research associate and a lecturer. Our salary then was 17 an hour, 55 final exams. Oh, and you register 3 units in MA. Pwede ka na sa Nara residence. So I stayed with Nara for beloved Nara for 8 years. So I'm especially grateful for them for allowing me to teach a graduate seminar on research methodologies in Southeast Asia, and to get a chance to work with an interesting group of students. It was a fun experience teaching again. I've taught for 8-9 years here. And I tell you, having UP students in your class is incomparable. The Japanese and American students, well, except the ones where when I was a teaching assistant, pale in comparison to UP's own. So if the institution may be declining resource-wise, but you will always be proud of a UP student. Second, I'm likewise grateful to the Third World Studies Center. Its director, Dr. Rico Jose, okay. And its staff for co-sponsored this talk. I worked with the place from 1979 to 1988, and it was second home to many of us. A place where one can be politically and academically heretical, produce good works, meet fascinating folks, and enjoy the best brewed Benguet coffee in Diliman. So salamat Rico, Bien, and the rest of the staff. Okay, what do I do next? Okay, to the topic at hand. But we go further, I think it would be appropriate to introduce you to at least two of its most notorious subvarieties that are most hated and dreaded in the Philippines and elsewhere. So this is Ratus mindanensis. It has no relationship with Mindanao, okay? It's an Ratus norvegicus. It's larger than mice. Rats are larger than mice. Origins are in Asia. Very invasive species, opportunistic survivors, living near humans always, no? Extremely intelligent. So that's why you understand why rats are used for laboratories, no? And a keen sense of smell. There's a wonderful book on this journalist studying rats in New York City at 2 o'clock in the morning. Pag lumalabas, when the rats come out of Chinatown, some of the rats go to the Italian restaurant rather than to the Chinese restaurant. They have a sense of taste, no? They're widely distributed but often island endemic. In New Zealand, for example, they found out that even the most isolated of islets are occupied with a rat. Lifespan is 1 year. I think the female produces 4 ton I think, but they're prolific, no? So that's the Ratus mindanensis. Okay, and this is the mindanensis, the black rat. I think we see this most often. This is just a description from a nice fellow from the National Museum in the US in 1913. The Americans were really fascinated with them. It's sometimes called neglectos for food, coconut, rice, sugar, and maize. Most invasive species, and it's a good source of food. Okay. And then you have the brown rat, you know, Hanover rat, Norway rat, blah blah blah. It's the one you see on the streets. Okay. Body 10 inches. This is a brief description. They probably originated in North China. It's spread in Europe and the United States. That's true of omnivore. And again, extremely intelligent. You know. Okay, so these are the rats that we're going to share with you. And so, let me begin my lecture now. So, with that appropriate background, we can now proceed to the meat of the discussion, which was inspired by a couple of stories that I've told in the past and recently. The first was of Ed Tadem, telling me that every time he visited his comrades in the Hook movement in Central Luzon, one of the things that they asked him is if he would be interested in feasting on star meat. Star, baliktad, rats. It took me a while to overcome my senior moment to realize that star, if spelled backward, would be rats. No? Very typical Filipino humor. So his rural comrades wanted an urban cadre like Ed to sample the cuisine of the countryside, perhaps in anticipation of the possibility that as politics become polarized in the 1960s, Ed will abandon his petty bourgeois comforts and get ready for a life with the Maquis. Okay. So I confess I like the communist twist to Ed's story because while doing research on this project, which is ongoing by the way, I found this news item in the Cebu Daily News, March 8, 1952 issue, that reported the visiting Secretary of Agriculture, Juan G. Rodriguez, warning his audience, the Cebuano audience, of an ongoing plot by the Chinese and North Korean communists to introduce bubonic plague into the Philippines by shipping down infected rats into ports like Cebu. So Rodriguez declared, quote, "Should you find any person who desists from killing rats, watch out, he may be a communist." And then that Kapampangan communist sour rat's meat was not a deviation from the culinary norm. Rats, after all, are a culinary favorite in the rice bowls all over the country. Here, for example, was how one of those fantastic writers, Hilda Cordero Francisco, described Fernando, described how folks from as far as Nueva Ecija to Camarines and Cotabato value the cuisine. Quote, "And the controversial rat? In the past, when sugarcane fields were cleared by burning, one started the fire on the perimeter so that the field rats would be driven to the center. And the farmers would have an instant feast of barbecued rodents. Field rats are such unwelcome pests in Nueva Ecija, rat tails can be presented to the municipio in exchange for bounty. Beauty queens in Cotabato were once elected using rat tails as votes. Farmers dig a deep canal where hundreds of fleeing pests fall in and drown. Field rats are sold in the market, dressed and tied together. In Camarines, they are speared on sticks and sold by ambulant vendors. Field rats are allegedly clean for they eat nothing but palay, rice, long accepted by the rural folks as a free source of protein. Field rat flesh tastes like chicken, quote unquote, as provincial folks are wont to describe anything that is good. Rice, I'm very bad at it. Ano yun? Rat? I can't find. Ayun. There you go. Okay. Here, for example, is a recipe for a rat adobo. In case you want to go home and sample. It's very good. I tried this in Los Baños. It's very good. It tastes like chicken. I can send you a copy of it if you're interested. So let me continue.
Send us the cook meat.
Yeah, cook meat. Okay. The second story dates back from my childhood years in the northern Osamis City. Okay? In the northern Mindanao, Osamis City, very sleepy town. But before we were sent to experience the big city, which was Cebu, our aunts would warn us to stay clear of Cebu, Siopao. Okay. And the reason, and let me say this in design, kay kahibelo ka dong, kanang kalami sa Siopao sa Supo, naa sa karne nga ibutang sa Siopao. Dili basta-basta ang karne kay dili tambukon. Karne sa Ilaga. I know better the meat that's put in the Siopao in Cebu is not just an ordinary meat. It's meat without fat. It's the meat of the rat. So we would take the overnight boat to Cebu, go around Colon Street, and when hungry, avoid such stores as Siopao King. Again, like Ed's story, the attraction or repulsion of Cebu Siopao was not just conjured out of rural hickish minds. It was, as I found out while poring over congressional debates on the Mindanao problem in the 1950s, I also found out that politicians were debating about it. And here is a 1954 exchange between the Lanao Congressman Dumukao Alonto, very wonderful guy, Dumukao Alonto, and the Cebu warlord Ramon Durano. I've been trying to look for a picture for Don Ramon, but all I got is his statue. After the latter, after Alonto rose, after Durano rose to interpellate Alonto regarding his speech on the hunger crisis in Cotabato because of widespread rodent infestation. So let me quote excerpts from that debate. Durano. Here is Durano. I have to look for my hand. There are no rats in Cebu, gentleman from Lanao. Alonto, is the gentleman sure of that? I think that the people in the Bureau of Plant Industry know what they are talking about. And when they say that there are rats in Cebu, there must be rats in Cebu. If there are no four-legged rats, maybe there are two-legged ones. Durano, I do not know of any two-legged rats in Cebu, but four-legged rats are none in Cebu. I am going to explain that to the gentleman from Lanao. This is official record. Does not the gentleman agree with me that the rats belong to the rabbit species? Alonto, yes. Durano, and that the rabbits are very palatable food, especially in New York. Alonto, that is right. This is a lawyer, product of UP, yes. He agreed. Ramon, my idol. And Durano, and inasmuch as the rats are of the same species as the rabbit, does not the gentleman think that it is a nice idea to teach our people to eat rats instead of dogs? Alonto, Mr. Speaker, I do not know about the people of Cebu. Durano, one thing again that I'm going to inform the gentleman from Lanao is that during the Japanese occupation, there was a scarcity of meat in Cebu. So the Chinese pancitterias caught all the rats and cooked them with pancit, and the people found out that the pancit with cooked rats are better than any of those cooked with other meats. Formerly, we abhorred eating the meat of the dog, but it has been found out that the dog's meat is better than the meat of hogs and other meats. So, it is a question, Mr. Speaker and gentleman from Lanao, of adapting ourselves to such a situation indicative of an educated people. So, instead of eliminating the rats totally, and is that the gentleman's proposal, it should be made gradually. And I wish to inform, this is still Durano, I wish to inform the gentleman that in Johns Hopkins Hospital, there is now a research being conducted whereby they extract a certain substance from rats and inject it to sterile people. I understand it could restore an individual's vitality, Mr. Speaker. So if we exterminate the rats, the sterile people of the Philippines will have no more recourse in order to produce more people for further development. Therefore, my question, Mr. Speaker, is the gentleman from Lanao for an all-out eradication of rats? I understand that this is a very dangerous move to eliminate the rats totally. Durano continued this attack, asking Alonto how many rats the people of Cotabato could eat to stave off hunger, and suggesting what parts of the rat is palatable. Then to end his riposte, on a high note, Durano offered to the flustered Alonto, quote-unquote, 2 of Cebu's Pied Pipers, who can be sent to Cotabato to lead the rodents to the river, an inevitable death, and also in the process, save the national government some money. In exchange, Cotabato will be able to provide jobs to these, quote, musicians who are practically starving. A decent quid pro quo. So there you have it. Not only did Cebu have the best pancit and Siopao, I may add, Cebuanos were also the first to discover a potent natural alternative to Viagra, and the city hosts the only Filipino edition of those legendary Pied Pipers were mainly based in Europe and in children's fantasies. Okay. And there's the third story. The third story is this. The third story was something I stumbled upon while doing research in General Santos and Cotabato in 2008 for yet another project on the social history of the Moro Rebellion. My good friend, Mindanao State University professor and Moro feminist Ruth Aguiam suggested that aside from interviewing MNLF veterans, both men and women, we also should talk to the other side, the so-called Christian Ilagas, who were the advanced columns of the armed forces of the Philippines during the MNLF rebellion in the 1970s. Rufus Driver was a bishop, quote-unquote, of a local chapter of the Moncadista movement. And when told about the project, he introduced us to a friend who he said was active in the Ilaga movement of his time. Dodong, that is real name, that's him, recalled stories about the battles against Muslim Barracudas before the full-scale war happened in 1975. I asked him if he, as Cebuano, did not have a hard time working together with Ilonggos, supposedly the majority of the members of the Ilaga organization. I assumed that he knew of the popular acronym associated with the Ilagas, the Ilonggo Land Grabbers Association, and their legendary leaders, Commander Toothpick and his brother, Commander Toothbrush. If you go down Lanao those days, they say he's still there, no? The brothers Toothpick and Toothbrush. And so, no, he said that his soul is moving around the Lanao community. Thank you, Jerusalem. So his answer, Dodong's answer surprised me. He said that he was a member of another Ilaga group that were Cebuanos, but not Ilonggos. Their communities steered clear of the Ilonggo-Maguindanao skirmishes, but were forced to eventually form their own armed group when the battles spilled over the Cebuano areas. Asked why they adopted the name Ilagas, Dodong said because it was already the most popular anti-Muslim identification of the time. And he hastened to add that while they call themselves Ilaga, they give it an entirely different meaning. For Dodong and his comrades, I lost it again there. The term Ilaga meant imitating the action of rats, especially the way they stealthily approach rice bodegas or the homes of farmers in the late night or early morning to feast on food and bring extra home. Like the rats, therefore, Dodong and his group would raid the villages of Maguindanao quietly and kill all they could lay their hands on while these people were sleeping, men, women, and children. This for me was an eye-opener. The term Ilaga, it turns out, had many claimants, and one can actually imagine various kinds of anti-Muslim militia groups running around the hinterlands of Lanao del Sur and Cotabato, claiming to be Ilagas but having really no close ties with each other. Now they have churches. Okay. So So I highlight these three stories, slow stories, this afternoon to suggest a number of things. First, that the shape and perhaps even the shape of local and perhaps even national politics in the early middle post-war period was not just driven by the interests of families, revolutionaries, and spies. The politics was also very much determined by ecological factors. The success or failure of a battle, the destruction of a village, was also sparked by the role played by rodent infestation and the outcome of bloody political combats. In southern Mindanao, which is something that I know more, a target area settlement zone, massive deforestation followed by settlers who came in the thousands after the war, altered the environment in a way that enabled rodents to thrive in the thousands. In the mid-1950s, the biologist D. Villatolit, I think it's David, returned from Mindanao and gave this report. As a result of the cutting and burning of trees, the long-range factors, quote, carnivores, insectivores, other mammals, birds, reptiles, etc., fled away, and the short-range factors, bacteria, fungi, mites, ticks, fleas, lice, and other disease factors perished in great numbers. To make conditions worse, abundant sunshine soon reduced humidity and brought so much warmth that many more species in the forest died. But in the midst of all of these changes, only one cosmopolitan mammal, R. ratus, survived well, and this became man's commensal. Okay. The ensuing battle was the battle over land and water rights between retreating Maguindanaos and invasive Tagalogs, Visayans, and Ilonggos were waged using ethno-religious but also the themes that were associated with Iraq. So I would suggest then that that conflict really is very much framed by that. A comprehensive evaluation of the origins of the war in Muslim Mindanao will remain incomplete if we do not factor in rodents and pestilence. Okay. Okay. Seryoso muna ako dito. Okay. This is a nice book. Rodents are perfect example of a creature that is obnoxious, revolting, and nauseating. The description of Professor Hans Sincer, an American physician and bacteriologist, whose book, Rights, Lies, and History, published in 1935, still stands as one of the classic texts on rodents, and history aptly captures the repulsive nature of rats. He writes, from the point of view of all other living creatures, the rat is an unmitigated nuisance and pest. There is nothing that can be said in its favor. It can live anywhere and eat anything. It carries disease of man and animals, plague, typhus, trichinella, spiralis, rat-bit fever, infectious jaundice, possibly French fever, probably foot and mouth disease, and a form of equine influenza. Its destructiveness is almost unlimited. So it is especially the fear of disease, as warned by Secretary of Agriculture Rodriguez and Professor Sincer, that make the rat a fearsome animal. So here's a short listing of the diseases that rats, as well as and the lice and fleas that reside in our bodies could do to us humans. Sample lang ito. There's more actually. There's more. You can just Google them. So I may have the leptospirosis soon. We will see. No? So be careful. Okay. So then from Sincer, his work was followed by this guy, wonderful historian William H. McNeill, picks up where Sincer left, and in his classic work, Plagues and Peoples, the University of Chicago professor emeritus listed down the impact of epidemics on the plague on empires the world over. So here's I'm reproducing a sort of one of McNeill's tables of empires being destroyed as a result of rodent infestation. Okay, 90%, two-thirds of population killed. So kasi the bubonic plague started in Asia. Okay. And there have been accounts of Napoleon's army not only being beaten by the coldness of the Russian winter, but also severely weakened when they started to eat infected rats. And those who fought in the American Civil War, many would suffer from diseases as well as from the wounds of war. Here is James McPherson summarizing the book, Living Hell, The Dark Side of the Civil War, by the historian Michael C. Adams. To quote, lice and chiggers. Alam niyo chiggers? You know what chiggers are? Like small
Ticks.
ticks, pero it's smaller. Four-leg organisms that grow into a kind of mite. No. Were ubiquitous. No soldier, Union or Confederate, escaped the misery of they caused. Malnutrition and diarrhea gravely impaired the efficiency of armies, causing depression, debility, night blindness, muscular debility, neuralgia, nerve pain, and susceptibility to major diseases. Finally, emaciated, men of both armies could not march or fight and died. Depressing ito. So Secretary Rodriguez's fears were not solely his own, however, or that of the Philippine government. This was a fear widely shared by the anti-communist bloc. As the Korean War continued to rage and the Cold War had redefined the alignment of forces in post-war Southeast Asia, the United States worried about the same thing. It was concerned that its troops will catch the plague while fighting in Asia, but was more quite alarmed if the soldiers bring back the bacteria-filled lice and fleas from rats with them back to Kansas. You can see this in the concern permeating in the old village-based studies. This is a free website by the U.S. military. It's called Armed Forces Pest Management Board. It's a wonderful website of very detailed studies made by the funded by the American military in the 50s on how mosquitoes and rats affect villages. So you can see the concern permeating all the village studies of mosquitoes and rats in this website. It's a very wonderful website, and the recurring warning by policymakers and scientists about the threat of the spread of the plague in mainland United States. So constant fear of the rat revolved around the plague. It began in Asia in the 1860s, spread in 1894. By 1894, 10 million people were died. The impact of the plague went down in 2000 to under 20,000, largely because of antibiotics. But then I found this in the website yesterday. In 2014, not this year, 30,000 Chinese in the village of Yumen, out of 100 residents, were forcibly isolated after they found out that a 38-year-old man had the plague. Fascinating. So, where do I go now? So these kinds of fears, one external arising from the Cold War and from global history, and the other domestic and resulting from the massive environmental and demographic transformation of the new republic, would, I suggest, inform the purportage and study of rats in the post-war period. To underscore how seriously the pestilence was, the Bureau of Plant Industry released this map to the public highlighting the provinces where rat infestation was its worst. So practically the entire Philippines, no? This is 1954. Okay. Mindanao was
Worst.
kasi as the lumbermen are cutting the trees, settlers are following. It really destroyed the ecology. Okay. Beyond the maps was the panic. So from this slide to the next succeeding slides are based on the data I called from news clippings of the Manila Times and Daily Mirror in the Lopez Museum. You can still find them there. And local newspapers in Cebu, like Cebu Daily News of the Republic, and the University of San Carlos Cebuano Study Center. It gives you an idea, at least in the eyes of the state and the newspaper and the media, how perilous rodent infestation had become. So look at this. It's 100,000s to millions that were being reported. So in Cotabato, they thought it began in Dinaig, in Midsayat, and this is western Mindanao, within southwestern Mindanao. And by 1954, a few years later, it was now in Davao. 80% of Mindanao total rice production died, and these are in the settlement areas. 200,000 people, this is what Congressman Alonto reported, were suffering. And then 56, 75 million rats killed, 15 provinces, and, they were giving this statistics. The morale of settlers were very low, and everybody wasn't happy with what was happening. 1959, 86 families in Cotabato alone needed government security. Okay. Then in 60-61, you still have the same problem. And what's interesting about this is that the rat infestation began to spread in these provinces which were once thought to be, quote, have only moderate rat infestation. And then of course Bulacan, Pampanga, Tarlac, Nueva Ecija. What made things complicated was, apart from rats, worm, locust, and mosaic disease were affecting the crops in Batangas and Bicol. So rats in the Liguasan Marsh and Buluan Lake were lost to infestation. Same in 1964 and 65. There was a ratio of 9.6 million rats versus 2 million people. More rats than people. If this were in Lanao, any president would win because the warlords in Lanao would get the rats vote. So in 65, you have spreads in Mindanao, Ifugao, Mindanao Orientals, Aklan, Samar, Surigao, and areas of Bulacan and Davao. Remember, Davao is a very big province, no? 68, the same thing. And you can see the magnitude and the cost of dealing with the rodent. Senator Emmanuel Pillais in the Senate hearing said 30% of agricultural production in 1968, about 1 billion pesos were lost. Okay. Okay, here's sample also rat infestation of provinces. If you notice, Mindanao, Central Luzon, Mindanao, Central Luzon, rice balls, sugar. Next, rat density, Lanao fits them all. And Lanao this was Commander Toothpick eventually ended, supposedly there. My grandmother still worships his grave. Alright. Hair damage in 68. I can lend you, I should share you the statistics so that you have time Q&A. Now this one I found in a report in the Daily in Manila Times. It listed the different barangay municipalities in Nueva Ecija alone which were infected by rice. If you notice, okay, only Bungahan, okay, was below 50%. Laur, 38%. I think the total is 75% of Nueva Ecija's rice stands were infected by rats. No? So the statistics are there, the economics are there. No? So how did institutions like the national government, the local government, and communities respond to the pestilence? The national government responded this way. I found these things by supplying rat campaign, by popping up operations, the burning. They extended warfarin. You know what warfarin is? It's an anticoagulant. It's supposedly used for people with heart diseases, but it's supposed to kill the rat. So there was all these efforts by the national government to spread chemicals, drugs, help promote community assistance. Mapping operation basically they sometimes brought in the military, producing a rat manual, which include promotion of rat's meat among children. I'll go back to that later. In 59 Magsaysay.
Why children?
I will go back to that later. Okay. In 1959, President Magsaysay, true to his intelligence, said, hey, you have to develop a pathogen for rat, to kill rats. There's no data of how successful they were. In 1960, you have the same thing, you know. In the 1960s, something became more noticeable. The different agencies were operating, thanks in part to, I think, the entry of Technocrats in the Macapagal administration, Gloria, the old man. But in Davao, you have this problem like this, a farmer superstition. Now, those of you from our province probably have heard this, no? Scientists always have a hard time convincing farmers to kill rats. You know why? Because in the evening, the rats will kill the children with pro quo. No? You don't want to insult the king rat. Okay. So in the 1950s, for example, the Rockefeller Foundation sent a bunch of scientists into Indonesia to introduce warfarin. Nobody took warfarin. Again, because the king rat would get mad. No? There were also contentions here. Money, depending on those who got support, were usually connected with the national government, parang DAP, no? The DAP. So in Negros, supporters of opponents of Macapagal did not get money, but in Cotabato, that Utug Matalam got some support. Okay, and here is something that, because I described the paper, the lecture as multidisciplinary, scientists actually joined the war in rats, and I will end up with that later. Successful was warfarin. If you want to poison your loved ones, you know, gradual weakening and death. You know, they even have this in newspapers where this one, this journal is doing it, and how they were done. Okay. The other one was this. This was the one a response to bug-size called that pathogens be developed. So they tried salmonella, but it turned out that salmonella had a very different, limited impact. So they went back to warfarin. Okay, wait. Okay. At the local level, the local governments basically tried to reflect, do what the national government did. Operation Knockout, for example, in Cotabato and Cavite. They tried to increase their health budgets and personnel. The impacts have been uneven, no data on this. But in Davao, for example, the local government tried to conduct a city rat campaign that failed because the squatter voters more important than rats. But if you want to win votes, the squatter voters will come in. Against a farmer superstition in Zamboanga del Sur and in Batanes, okay, this is very fascinating. I found a couple of this. The municipal council actually passes a law requiring everyone to kill 5 rats or get penalized for 1 peso for being lazy. Okay. And then in the responses by individuals and communities, you have this from the weird, young people probably don't know Pascual Racoyal anymore. No? Pascual Racoyal was really, the perennial presidential candidate. Okay. I think in 1971 when he won UP, no? Did he win UP?
I don't know.
That had more votes than Marcos in UP. He's a very nice guy. He lived in a
His campaign slogan against Pagal and Marcos was that he was the only one who had a certificate of sanity from the National Mental Hospital because he was released after being in the National Mental Hospital. And so he challenged Pagal to also
show his
produce a certificate of sanity.
What I remember about Pagal was that he was proposing a plastic dome, how to defeat the Russians, He was proposing to create a plastic dome that will cover the Philippines. So all the Russian missiles will just bounce back.
Hindi lang anti-missile yun, anti-typhoon.
Anti-typhoon. And the second person who did that, or thought of that, was Imelda Marcos. So, Raquel, of course, it got engaged and said, I think plan headquarters to do it for free, blah, blah, blah. Students actually from UP, UST, Ateneo, and the big schools in Manila went to Cotabato to help kill rats. And then, this is what my favorite, Operation Survival Beauty Contest. I actually saw this when I was growing up. You run a candidate, and the winner is based on how many tails the supporters can bring. Yeah. It's not the beauty, it's the tails. So it's very limited. It became so popular that the Cebu customs actually started inspecting all boats coming from Bohol. Okay, because like flying voters, some of the wily Cebuanos began buying rat tails from their fellow Boholanos so that they would win. Yeah? So rat prices in Pampanga. And then this one, and I will go back to the Bureau of Land, this one, Department of Health official in Surigao said, well, if you can't take him, eat him. Okay? Because rats are medicinal. So he conducted an experiment. This is the Manila Times. Conducted experiment, told everybody from the village, and gave them barbecue rat's meat. And he told us they were well received. So if you notice, the institutional kind of institutional response to infestation can be either money or campaign. Okay, money, warfarin, bringing the military. So if you look at it at the local level, it's very creative. That has from the 50s to, I think even now, you have all these creative responses by people on how to deal with rats. That has disappeared now, actually, and I'll explain why. Okay. Now, a major stumbling block to local government efforts was that two-legged rat. You know this guy? Who is it?
Is that Avellino?
Avellino. What is Avellino famous for?
What are we in
Power
power
for.
for?
Yeah, what are we in power for?
For the
How could how dare the National Bureau of Investigation investigate me? Anyway, we'll all go to hell, you know. And in hell, there will be no investigating committee. Of course, the second person to copy that, to plagiarize it, was Imelda Marcos again. I think when she was asked about her wealth in the 80s, she said, "What are we in power for?" Okay, so so the major stumbling block, of course, are local politicians who use the resources or take advantage of the resources to enrich themselves. So I think this is where the idea of the two-legged rat, which I think came from the United States, began to develop. Okay, and of course, one of them, famous, was House Speaker Avellino. Okay. So now we have that. No? But it continues to this very day. This is the National Daily Inquirer edition. So that's my next research, maybe. The two-legged rats. Now, under Marcos, things happened. A couple of things happened. One was Marcos was probably after Macapagal, the first president to appreciate two powerful institutions in the state: the army and the technocracy. The first thing he did, therefore, was to centralize the campaign against rat in Camp Aguinaldo. The military now was distributing the resources, to agencies like the Bureau of Plant Industries, and waging the campaign in behalf of these guys. Okay? And when Congress tried to limit Marcos's budget on the work of the campaign, he would shift it by bringing in military budget. He also would use assistance from the outside, especially if Congress didn't get the resources. And in '68, he developed a plan by technocrats on how to scientifically destroy the rat to deal with the rat campaign. Okay, so one of the immediate consequences of this empowered state under Marcos was the disappearance of local initiatives and creative responses to the anti-rodent campaign. Instead, we get reports from technocrats who are now supplying the public with quote-unquote scientific information on the campaign, which is very bland. Technocrats really write badly, and in their presentation and empirical finding. This kind of technocratic reportage on the rat campaign would become the norm under Marcos and would still stay the same even after the dictator fell. So, here, okay. That said, there were efforts by scientists then, to go back to Ed's question. That said, there were efforts to continue to deal with the rat problem in '58. And how much worthy and interesting was lost when Marcos took over the rat campaign and became more centralized in a way. Let me close this presentation with this like multidisciplinary note. Okay. First, if you put there you go. Oh, wait. So Marcos. Under Marcos, the study of rats became boring and scientific. There was a rodent research center in Los Baños, and by the time I got there, it was already one empty room. They moved it to Denver. Now the rodent research center has moved from Australia. Okay. Now, I would like to end with this. Okay. In 1958, a group of scientists from the food department in UP College of Agriculture said, let us try to help people deal with rural poverty. Okay. So what they did was to conduct this taste test around Los Baños, okay, wherein they made sausages, 4 kinds of sausages. Okay.
Pork yan.
So one sausage was pork fat, pork loin, 50%. One was 60% pork loin, pork fat, 50%, 60%. Ito yung, this is the outcome. Okay. So general acceptability was high with pork rat meat and pork fat meat. Okay. This came closely with, I have to look for that. Came closely after the Bureau of Plant Industry issued a manual, a 12-point manual, in which point number 10 said we should encourage Filipinos to eat, especially children, to eat rat's meat because their taste haven't developed yet. So it is, yeah, so yeah, so I have to look for that. I am really bad at this, but I have it in my, I may have lost it in this version of the computer. So in response to that, the scientist did this. Then I will be close to that, just to show you what disappeared under Marcos. So they conducted this around Los Baños, and you will notice that the highest percentage were pork loin and rat meat and pork fat. Highest, of course, rat meat. So this professor, he's a retired professor, he's a wonderful guy, interviewed him, and then goes to his dean, and says, now we have found a way to solve rural poverty and calorie deficiency of children in the agricultural areas. Here is my proposal. I would like funding for this. So the dean looks at it and says, kadiri naman ito! And with that, he went back to his laboratory. Disgusted that his attempt to help, he solve the rural problem, was kicked out. Was rejected by his professor, after his dean, and he eventually retired, in Los Baños. I found the manual. So the manual that inspired this research was from the Department of Plant Industries, and point number 10 said, still another method that also gives lasting control is to teach people to eat rat's meat, especially the children who have not yet acquired any prejudice against the said meat. Once the people have come to like it, the chances are that there will no longer be a serious infestation, for the people themselves will go after them, provided, of course, the rats are not bred or allowed to propagate for the purpose. So with that, I'm going to close this talk with this really conclusion. Thank you.